Functioned as a temple during the time of Queen Cleopatra and the Greek pharaohs. So this could be the perfect place for Cleopatra's lost tomb.
For over 2,000 years, her name has echoed through time. Cleopatra, the last pharaoh of Egypt, the queen whose beauty and power rewrote history. But her final secret, the one buried with her in death, has remained hidden.
It's definitely strange that just in the middle of the desert, there's just this random staircase.
What is the purpose of this mysterious staircase?
Until now. Deep beneath the sands near Alexandria, scientists believe they've uncovered something far more than a tomb, something that defies explanation and chills those who've seen it. What did they really find inside Cleopatra's resting place? And why is the world suddenly afraid to open it?
Do you see water here? We're going the other direction.
Legend versus landscape. For more than 2,000 years, Cleopatra, the seventh's tomb, has drifted between fact and fable, fragments of rumor stitched to scraps of stone. Her death in 30 BCE closed an empire-sized chapter. The fall of the Ptolemaic line, the end of Egypt's independence, and the Roman dawn. Ancient writers, Plutarch, Suetonius, gave us a tragic curtain call. Antony, defeated, fell on his sword. Cleopatra followed, legend says, by asp bite, a queen claiming divinity in her final breath. Octavian, soon Augustus, allegedly granted the lovers a joint burial befitting their rank. Their deaths are documented, their resting place is not. Hints point to Isis. Cleopatra styled herself the new Isis, and classical texts allude to a tomb near, or within, a temple to the goddess of magic, motherhood, and resurrection. To Romans, she was a siren. To Egyptians, semi-divine. A burial at an Isis sanctuary would be more than pageantry. It would be theology, rebirth by myth and rite. But Alexandria, the queen's stage, would not hold still. Founded by Alexander, the city once glittered with colonnades, promenades, and the world's most famous library. Cleopatra ruled from Antirrhodos Island, in a harbor bright as hammered copper. There she courted allies, schemed, and, many believe, died. Nature erased the evidence. Earthquakes, storm surges, and subsidence pushed whole districts underwater. Palaces sank. Causeways split. Temples slid beneath 16 feet of sea and centuries of silt. The throne room of a civilization became a drowned archive. Archaeology chased a moving target. Coastlines warped. Landmarks renamed. Maps contradicted maps. Every expedition fought 2 millennia of distortion. Then, a watershed. French marine archaeologist Franck Godio's late 20th century dives. Sonar traced avenues of columns. Cameras revealed sphinxes and lintels incised with hieroglyphs. Coins bearing Cleopatra's profile surfaced from the seabed. Proof her city was not a legend, but a submerged reality. The undersea finds sketched her life's footprint. They did not reveal her death's address. At the start of the new millennium, people began to consider a different theory. If priests had predicted storms, both political and natural, maybe they moved the queen inland, away from the Roman capital and the tide's devastation. The magnetic needle directed towards Taposiris Magna, a site of temples and tombs west of Alexandria. This place is literally known as the Great Tomb of Osiris. The prevailing view thought otherwise. Gods lived in temples, not kings. Royal dead were sent to valleys or pyramids, not sanctuaries. But Cleopatra wasn't an ordinary queen. If she were Isis during her lifetime, wouldn't she choose the house of Isis in her afterlife and lie next to her Osiris, Antony? The quest here passed from the earth, being excavated, to the symbolic meanings. The queen's identity became the one clue. The queen who exquisitely managed her public image might as well script her burial with equal intent. A grave that is theater, theology, and a statement all at once. 2 millennia later, the instruments began to decode what the scribes left unspoken. Under the deteriorating pylons, the ground scans indicated a shape too regular to be natural. The coins, statues, and inscriptions, though silent, spoke about one name repeatedly and forcefully. The myth seemed to come alive. The landscape started to converse with man. And at the place where the desert stops and the salt wind blows, Taposiris Magna was awake. Sands covering indications of roads, the loudness of walls claiming new life, and a formation in the rock that was not of coincidence. The Queen's last secret seemed to be nearer not because of one treasure, but because the place at last acted like a tale she would narrate. Layered, symbolic, and intentional. Cleopatra's tomb was never a search of mere maps. It was also a tale of her life. Discover the last story of the woman, and her stone might be found. At Taposiris Magna, the story became clearer. Something artificial went beneath the temple like a tide-proof signature. The map was transforming into a portal. And when that doorway finally revealed its first line, it wasn't ink or gold, it was myth hiding in stone. Taposiris Magna. For decades, Taposiris Magna looked like one more sun-blanched ruin, a temple 45 kilometers southwest of Alexandria, whose grandeur had long since collapsed into sand. Its name, Great Tomb of Osiris, was treated as a metaphor. Temples were ritual engines, not royal vaults. A few columns, shattered reliefs, drifting dunes, catalog it and move on. Except that Taposiris refused to be only a husk. It was a palimpsest, Greek and Egyptian script sharing walls, Hellenistic architecture braided with pharaonic motifs. A place that felt like Cleopatra's lifelong thesis. 2 worlds fused by design. In 2005, Dominican archaeologist Dr. Kathleen Martinez arrived with a hypothesis hinged less on treasure than on logic. Cleopatra performed Isis visually, politically, and religiously. Isis's myth is resurrection through devotion. Gather the scattered Osiris, knit him whole, beget renewal. If Cleopatra authored her final act, why was she buried as an ordinary Ptolemy? Why not script a burial that mirrors the goddess, inside a temple to Isis, within a sanctuary named for Osiris? Skeptics waved her off. Prior digs yielded little. No text names the temple as a royal interment. The site seemed too modest for a queen. Yet Martinez saw continuity where others saw debris. Bilingual inscriptions aligned with Cleopatra's cultural diplomacy. Architectural hybrids matched her dynasty's identity. She began to dig, slowly, methodically, as if reading in Braille. Seasons turned, shafts appeared, a honeycomb beneath the flagstones. Narrow passages dropped into limestone. From those depths came Ptolemaic statuary, one likely Ptolemy XII, Cleopatra's father, and coins with the queen's unmistakable profile. The temple's floor plan started to feel like an argument. Repeated invocations to Isis and Osiris, reliefs of offerings by a woman whose facial geometry echoed known Cleopatra busts, phrases about eternal union incised like refrains. The significance of patterns outweighed that of precious stones. If this were a play, the actors were constantly changing their roles: identity, reincarnation, divine couple. Still, the most striking element, a royal room, remained mute. The sealed spur tunnels, the rubble-locked galleries, and the local rumors about the guardians that never sleep all pointed to something buried that was being protected. In 2022, the squad utilized the method of ground-penetrating radar. The image from the monitor revealed a surprise. An underground tunnel of more than 1,300 meters in length, absolutely straight through the rock, its dimensions reminiscent of Greek aqueducts, but located in the middle of the sanctuary of the Egyptians. This was a contradiction of a structure, and exactly what Cleopatra was like in her style. The direction of the alignment was similar to that of the ancient coastline, as if linking the submerged capital of her life to a hidden theology of her death. Among the very first easily approachable remnants, ceramics, broken Isis statuettes, coins, and the heavy smell of mummification in the stone, resin, and bitumen. The deeper the descent, the more intentional the site felt. The engineers measured the geometry, the arch stress evenly distributed, the harmonic curve tuned like an instrument. The function was stability. The meaning was resonance, a passage that was meant to be walked, sung, and believed. The arguments flourished. Was it a ceremonial path? Rites of renewal enacted in a hidden spine? A water supply? A trap? Martinez went on with the story. A passage between worlds, a literal undertext for Cleopatra's last claim. Isis beside Osiris, woman beside beloved, mortal beside myth. The instruments then indicated an empty area, a cavity covered by burnt stone that was once glowing limestone. A physical stop came where the story continued to say, go. Taposiris Magna turned from being a background. It was a conspiracy that corresponded to Cleopatra's syntax: crossbreed, dramatized, divine, exact. And just like any big plan, it kept the unveiling till the end. The sanctuary had presented its ground. The passage was the indication. What followed would be either the proof or the alert. Because beyond that scorched threshold, the site stopped telling a story and started keeping a secret: the impossible tunnel. The radar plots looked like music, clean, repeating, impossibly regular. A 1,300-meter corridor under Taposiris Magna, 2 meters high, cut dead true through limestone, its arch proportioned like a Greek aqueduct, but sealed inside an Egyptian temple. No Ptolemaic precedent matched its scale or rigor. Engineers called it a paradox. Archaeologists, a miracle. The crew called it what it felt like: the impossible tunnel. Getting to it was bodywork. Heat clawed past 100 degrees Fahrenheit. Dust turned breath into scraping. Drill-throughs met a layer of blackened stone. Not mineral staining, scorch. Circular burns, like a passage closed with fire. When the last plug cracked, the tunnel exhaled a stale, cooled gust, air that had not moved since before Christ. Salt crystals glittered like rime on the walls. Lamps picked out twin literacies, hieroglyphs, and Greek sigils, a sanctuary's vocabulary. Inside, the world tilted. Sections stood knee-deep in mineral water that shimmered, green-silver. Compasses spun, flickered. Batteries died too fast. Finds were small but telling. Coin scatter, pottery shards, and cis miniatures clasping ankhs. There were no burials here. There was an intention. Mapping brought the first shock of intellect. The ceiling described a harmonic curve that evened the load and carried sound. Whisper, and you hear yourself return 30 meters away, richer. The tunnel was both structure and instrument. An acoustic rite, a physics of prayer. Chant here, and stone sings back. Martinez's thesis tightened. A ceremonial artery tuned to carry invocation, Isis, Osiris, renewal, towards something guarded ahead. The earth had other plans. Ancient quakes had gnawed fissures into the limestone. Sensors chirped microshifts. Once a side alcove collapsed in a sigh of powder and rock, entombing tools where they fell. Twice, the team ran at the soft flutter of a coming tremor. Still, they advanced. Cleopatra waited 2,000 years, Martinez joked dryly. We can risk 10 more minutes. After 1 kilometer, the tunnel swelled up to a large room. The walls were not old and black. They were heat-polished, and some parts became glass-like. The instruments were detecting heat where there should have been cold. On the black stone that was covered in soot, carved warnings, passage of renewal. Those who sleep below must not be awakened. The tunnel ended in a barrier that seemed to be made by technology. Granite mixed with lead, seams closed up, not by mortar, but by melting. The surface was shining the same way, indicating that it was subjected to a very high temperature. The non-invasive scans were both unsatisfying and irresistible. What was behind the seal was a hall-sized chamber. Within the vacuum were two parallel dense, human-sized masses and a third smaller mass that was showing residual magnetism. The dataset was like a confession with one line blacked out. The crew moved back. At the barrier, the air was humming, so gentle that one felt it more than heard it. An operator even claimed that he started smelling ash hours after the place was ventilated. Another operator put his hand on the stone and softly, yet quietly, said that it felt like a sleeping animal. Were they just having fantasies? Probably. Nevertheless, the team's relationship to silence had changed with the tunnel, tuned as it was. Silence here was not void. It was charged. The distinction between architecture and intention became very faint. Who were the builders who used fire as their seal? Who among the clergy had such a mastery that they composed the music of a corridor like a harp and then fused an entrance? And what is it that gets lost or, on the contrary, released when you tear down a barrier that was not meant to be opened but to be a stronghold instead? The data was monotonously repeating the same thing: geometry, heat, inscription, and magnetism. Proceed, but at your own risk. So they performed the breach, slowly, in stages, and with documentation. And the question first changed from, "Where is Cleopatra?" to, "Why was she so carefully concealed?" The answer waited past the welded stone, and it didn't whisper. It throbbed. The Osiris corridor. The wall gave way in a shiver, not a crash. Stone loosening from stone like old breath. Beyond it, steps fell into shadow, edges worn as if touched by time itself. The team descended into a ribbon of carvings, the Osiris corridor, where reliefs told the old story in exquisite, exhausted color. Isis finding Osiris, tears birthing the Nile, hands knitting death to life. Every few meters, the same hieroglyph returned like a drumbeat. Rebirth. Below it, in Greek and Demotic, a line with teeth. Disturb the union, and you unbalance life and death. Martinez saw what the architecture wanted to be seen. This was not a hall, it was a catechism. Cleopatra's self-myth, Isis embodied, recast as geology. If she lay here, she did so as doctrine and spectacle, queen and goddess and theory made stone. The deeper they walked, the more the space argued for a pair at its end. Not a solitary monarch, but two bound into a cultic grammar. Side chambers proved it. In one, a mummy with a golden scarab over the heart, verses incised on the carapace, a portable theology. In another, a hammered gold funerary mask with Greek contours, a literal bridge of faces. Coins stamped with Cleopatra's profile glinted in dust. Alabaster canopic fragments suggested a high ceremony. Everywhere, the queen's afterimage in metal and phrase. Then the air turned against them. Workers coughed and teared up in minutes. Masks helped little. Instruments picked up a low, regular vibration, too tidy for random tectonics, too slow for machinery. Geophones set on the floor read a 42-second cycle, seismic microphones translating rock into a pulse. There were no quakes in the national logs. The sound came from below the slab. Underneath one of the panels, a relief turned the metaphor into a concrete one. Two persons standing, one with a uraeus, the other with laurel. The proud readout, the one who goes along with Isis. the one who was slain by the sword. A serpent intertwined with the infinity sign under their feet. The corridor silently whispered their names: Cleopatra and Antony, the goddess and the general, epitomized in language and stone. Partially, the explanations fell apart. Hydrogeology, ritual acoustics, ancient ventilation. None was able to explain the unchanging and the way the frequency moved upward when tools hit the walls, as if the contact was like a waking of something tiny in the rock. Then the metallurgy came. Lead and mercury appeared like hair-thin veins threaded through the plaster. Some pieces of the floor were heat-glazed smooth. In the past cosmologies, mercury was the blood of the gods and the soul's sealant. Here it seemed like an engineered barrier, a purposely created alchemy to contain. The corridor made one last argument. This was not just a precautionary measure against thieves. It was containment. Bans in 2 languages, dangerous metals, heat-blistered stone, a throb that was not an earthquake. All these things implied one aim: keep it in, don't let it out. Martinez paused at the last door, its surfaces honed through centuries of fire, and hesitated. The location had been storytelling in passages. Now it was the chapter-end period. The ministry took over. Ropes, soldiers, dead radios. Preservation was the official word. Unease was the one felt. However, scans revealed what archaeologists anticipate and fear at the same time. 2 human-like bodies on biers. A third, a small cylindrical object between them that is very hot to magnetometers. The corridor had transported them from fable to physicality, Isis and Osiris to lead and granite. Thus, it presented them a choice with a whiff of destiny: to interpret or to intrude. They did the cataloging. They had the arguments. They decided on the cut. History, always the waiting animal, stood at the door. And when stone finally swung away from silence, what waited was not a sarcophagus. It was a problem. The lover's warning. It began with beauty. In the first vault beyond the corridor, a relief carved on obsidian, polished to night, stopped the room. Isis and Osiris entwined under stars. Not in passion, but in equilibrium. Touch as architecture. Below, etched in braided scripts, the line that would echo through every decision after. Disturb not the lovers who sleep in silence. Their bond preserves the balance. At first, liturgy. Then, everywhere, the same sentence incised on lintels, scorched into mortar, scratched along the base of columns, as if a chorus of hands had tried to say it loudly enough to be obeyed. A small golden tablet lay nearby, its edges warped like candle wax, letters crisp inside the burn. Cleopatra, Thea Philopater, and Marcus Antonius in Koine Greek and Latin, 2 worlds named in one breath. The artifact was less proof than proclamation. This was their place, and the fire that kissed the tablet had not been symbolic. Lab work would later find magnetite, titanium, and volcanic glass fused to its base. Heat had been part of the ritual here, not an accident. The last barrier matched the story's seriousness. A wall of granite and lead, seamlessly fused. No joints, no chisels, only a glass-smooth face that once ran at 1,000 degrees. Along it, the warning returned, gouged deep like a plea. Let not the sleepers rise. Unease thickened into rationale. This wasn't designed to keep people out. It was built to keep something in. Toxic metals as sealants, fire as weld, warnings as contract. Even the iconography began to read like engineering. Balance must hold. Disturb it, and what is contained will move. An additional inscription, tucked low beneath a melted seam, cut metaphor with prophecy. Two figures kneel before gods. The caption reads, broken but legible. When love defies death, the world shall tremble. Poetry, yes. Also, thesis. Union here was not purely sentimental. It was functional, cosmological. Separate them, or even merely expose them, and something larger than grief might shift. The authority grasped the implication. The location was under a luxurious cover, a military presence around the place, drones flying, communication strictly controlled. The ministry's justification was preservation. The team's existence was a mix of trying to satisfy their curiosity, doing their duty, and hiding their fear. Infrared got through the melted face and provided a clean shape. Two human-sized figures on adjacent platforms. In between, a third object, cylindrical, with a peculiar magnetic signature. Each branch of science on the site offered a warning in its own words. Epigraphy: do not disturb. Materials: science: do not penetrate a lead-mercury granite seal without full preparation. Ritual studies: the couple is a system. Don't break it. Still, history grants exceptions solely to those who dare to create them. The door was a reality. So was the chance lying behind it. They organized the operation like the site was a nuclear disaster area. Negative pressure shelters, filtered suits, hoisting in stages, procedures written as if they were being performed. The final hours before the break seemed stretched, the tweets of the birds outside the temple sounding unbearably lively. None of the team members was superstitious. Everybody thought about mistakes. The distinction appeared to be just a matter of theory when the first microcore was drilled, and the stone let out a breath as warm as a hand. But the reliefs were still there, the last glimpses in stone. Do not wake what we have put to sleep. Our merger keeps the scales balanced. The ancients were loud, the moderns would be quiet, and would use a wrench instead. To unlock is to take a future instead of a warning. What slipped through with that first breath wasn't myth. It was chemistry, the black sarcophagus. The chamber's heart was a monolith of night. A sarcophagus cut from pitch-black granite so polished it ate the lamplight. No cartouches, no scenes, no seam line. 9 feet long, weighing tons, centered on a platform etched with scorched concentric circles, like an eye that had stared through heat. Instruments read a steady anomaly. The room sat at 22 degrees Celsius. The sarcophagus held at 29 degrees Celsius, unblinking day after day. Devices hiccuped as they neared. Battery bars fell, sensors jittered, as though the stone disliked witnesses. Spectrographs raised a brow, magnetite and titanium in concentrations rare for Egyptian quarries. Isotope signatures pointing to far-traveled, possibly volcanic stone. The problems multiplied. How was it moved, cut, and finished with such intolerance for error? Why the persistent warmth? Why the scorched dais? Hydraulics did what levers could not. 8 hours of micro-lifts teased a lid that wasn't obvious until it yielded. The air that slid out was dense and sweet metallic, mercury and resin, smelling less of rot than pharmacy. Inside, 2 bodies, wrapped and whole. The man, tall, robust, Roman skull lines, a healed rib scar where a sword could have ended a life. The woman, smaller, linen dusted with faint gold. Facial reconstruction later matched every published ratio, cheekbones, eyes, mouth, to Cleopatra's surviving busts. Between them, a bronze cylinder the size of a forearm, no seam, no hinge, its skin filmed with mineral halos. Symbols on the cylinder blended Greek characters with unknown glyphs, patterns more mathematical than linguistic. X-rays showed 3 organic shapes suspended in a clear matrix. Over hours, those shapes shifted imperceptibly. Position, density, temperature, like a sleeping animal, adjusting inside gel. Technicians frowned and recalibrated. The movement persisted. Then the team started coughing. Eyes burned, heads hammered. One collapsed. Filters loaded into masks. Alarms chirped. Protocols went rigid. Air samples told the story. Mercury vapor elevated. Arsenic and cinnabar particulates present. Preservatives, poisons, ritual agents, historic in recipe, lethal in dose. The sarcophagus had been charged like a trap or a vault, its atmosphere a deterrent that time had not disarmed. The cylinder was quarantined in Cairo for further studies. MRI and neutron scanning revealed more paradox. Weak electrical pulses emanating from the inside and rhythmic heat fluctuations resembling a metabolic curve. A hum, real and measurable, was recorded by the microphones at the edge of hearing. Labs paused to upgrade the containment facilities. The presence of the artifact started to be felt as something active, not just preserved. Security was set up around the temple. Soldiers were at the gates, signal jammers were humming, and there was a bland message about temporary suspension for safety going around. Within a smaller realm of clearances, rumors turned into hypotheses. Was the cylinder an advanced funerary device? Live organisms buried in a crystalline medium? A pathogen archive? A kind of engine? Cleopatra, after all, was notorious for pharmacology, poisons and antidotes as policy. Dr. Martinez made one last public statement, an epitaph for certainty. Cleopatra thought of death as a door, not as an end. What we have found might be the proof of her correctness. Then there was silence. Her research was field-sealed by the same reasoning that sealed the tomb. Data kept acting oddly. The thermal maps around the cylinder were showing very small waves. The magnetometers detected pulses that were sinking very badly, but at the same time, in a beautiful way, with the staff's heartbeats who were standing a bit too close. The object appeared to take over biology, just like a drum can produce a hum in a ribcage. The more the shielding was applied, the less the sinking was observed. However, loosening the shielding brought it back again. After 2 millennia of searching, not only a grave, but also an apparatus was found. The presence of heat, where one would expect deep freeze. Living things, where one would expect inaudibility. Toxins that still could bite. A device that still responded to the atmosphere. And if the tomb was a system, the bronze at its center was the switch. Pandora in bronze. At arm's length, the cylinder looked simple. Bronze, smooth, marked with micro-engravings that caught light like water. Up close, it refused categorization. No seam, no cap, no hinge. Laser scans read an alloy wrong for antiquity. Bronze laced with iridium and tellurium. Trace elements alien to known Egyptian or Roman practice. Density models said it could withstand pressure that modern labs struggled to simulate. Under polarized light, the surface refracted in bands outside human vision, as if it had opinions about which wavelengths to keep. Tomography mapped an interior like a snow globe, 3 organic islands suspended in a crystalline medium. Over 12-hour runs, sensors logged tiny surges in heat and charge, cycles too precise for decay, too gentle for machines. One tech said the quiet thing out loud, "It's breathing." No one laughed. Neutron imaging glitched. Data cascaded into recursive fractals, an image folding into itself. Power dipped. Magnetometers popped a spike sharp enough to stun nearby equipment. When the lab settled, a low tremor of sound hung in the room, felt in the sinuses more than heard. Theories raced the quarantine. A funerary device preserving tissue beyond time, an archive of pathogens, a reliquary of essence in the language of rites. Texts from Egypt's late period mention breathless guardians sealed to protect sanctuaries. If Cleopatra wrote her end as Isis, perhaps she also seeded insurance, rebirth in a jar, vengeance in a cipher. Field evidence leaned darker. Air pulled from the burial chamber held spores that refused antibiotics, organisms neither cleanly bacterial nor fungal by modern taxonomy, built to survive mercury-rich, oxygen-poor niches. Hybrid life with a talent for waiting. If the cylinder held samples of body, of microbiome, of ritual agents, we weren't just reading history. We were touching it. By the third week, lab staff reported symptoms: cough, fatigue, odd headaches, despite protocols. Containment ratcheted up. Then microphones picked up a new sound, an intermittent clicking inside the cylinder that did not correlate with building systems, footsteps, or lab chatter. Thermal sensors logged a slight rise in internal oscillations, still safe, still small, now unmistakably rhythmic. The state acted fast. Taposiris Magna was placed under military protection. Signal jammers created a silent area. Cloud backups of the excavation went on and off like a candle. In Cairo, the cylinder was transferred into an isolated room with a vacuum, lead, and protocol. The file's tag changed from artifact to device. The whisper name outside the file was more disrespectful: Pandora. Before the line got cut, a piece of Martinez's last report became public. The cylinder is not inert. It reacts to observation. Its pulses synchronize with nearby living organisms' rhythms. The ancients referred to it as the heart of Isis. I think that's literally true. The sentence circled the globe because it was shocking and because it matched the data. Hypotheses became outlines. Some posited celestial fantasies, pulses peaking with moon cycles. Others referred to the science of synchronization, two oscillators having the same frequency when close enough. A few quieter voices raised a narrower question. What did the device need to keep balance that the tomb would later die to protect? And were we already, by our measurements, granting it what it wanted? The monitors revealed a pattern. Even though the cylinder was under shielding, its thermal and EM baselines were still capturing the sound of the room, shooting up when the staff was around, evening out when the area was vacated. It was a shadow of the people, a metronome that selected its players. If Cleopatra created it by commission, if not by hand, then she did not only the coffin city, but also an interface. If Cleopatra's tomb has finally been found, it may rewrite more than history. It may redefine how we handle the past itself. Should science press forward or step back? Like, comment, and subscribe if you want part 2 of this investigation. And watch the next video on your screen for another ancient mystery that refuses to stay buried.